This is Dani Beaumont with the Adobe Muse team, here to bring you the latest Adobe Muse Jam session. This will be recording number... This is Dani Beaumont with the Adobe Muse team. Hold on. This is recording number 211. And this is a really fun session. I realized I haven't done this kind of particular bent around responsive design, focusing on mobile devices in quite some time. So should be a good introductory session to the world of responsive. The way the world works here is if you're joining as part of the Zoom link, you're welcome to put questions in the chat pod. If you're following on Facebook Live, in the comments section here within Facebook Live, please go ahead and throw your questions, and I'll stop from time to time and see if I can pick them up as we go along. So, with that said, it's always challenging to find this live session. Make sure I get it all up and running. Probably come back to that in a bit. Let's get started. So if you want to follow along with me, from time to time I do put together notes for a session, and today's a good one. If you point your browser to tinyurl.com/MuJam, so MuseJam-211, you'll be able to access these notes. They'll be available after this session, and if you're watching this by way of YouTube, you're welcome to click the link to get to the web version of this page. I'll keep it updated with additions as time goes by, but it gives me a good set of notes and some nice references as we go along. So to begin with, there was a trend, I think it probably hit the web maybe 5 years ago, and it was this phrase known as mobile first. And it sounds as though I'm a career product manager. I haven't ever really been a web designer. I design websites, but it's not my primary purpose. I tend to try to learn from web designers. But I did study design to some extent in college. And one of the things that they teach you is something known as the extreme rule, which is, let's say you're designing a book. And in that book, you want to look at the longest headline and shortest headline in a book and make sure the typesetting that you're doing is going to look terrific through those two extremes. To some extent, I look at designing for mobile in that same way. The idea of mobile first is a concept that suggests that think about your users that are on mobile devices first, because chances are you're going to get more traffic from mobile devices these days than you will from a traditional desktop device. Having said that, the idea of putting all your design content, let me give you something just to look at here real quick. I'm going to go ahead and browse to some starter designs that we have available. This is also linked in those session notes. But these are a great way, if you're new to responsive design, to be able to download a site and actually interact with its design content and just really reinforce some of the concepts we're going to cover today. But this is an example of a portfolio website. And as I press and drag the edge of the browser down towards a mobile device, the layout changes. I also have the ability to change the content that you see for that smaller device. Here, we're getting a little redundant. I'm going to go ahead and hide that. So that if you're on a mobile device, I may not put a full contact form. I may just put the ability to call a shop, because it's a little unrealistic that someone sits there and fills out an extensive layout on a phone. When you think about your content, you have the ability to really understand the medium under which someone will be viewing your site. So if they're on the go, if they're on a mobile device, and secondly, be able to control the content that they see there. So let's take a look at that idea. When you talk about the idea of mobile first, I do believe it's a very important experience, but I'm more of the mindset to say, go ahead and lay out your largest breakpoint in a web design and put all of the content that you know you'll want on a desktop device. It's always important to sketch out on a piece of paper or really have in mind how each element on a page will look in the largest breakpoint all the way down to the smallest breakpoint. And that planning is going to serve you really well if you have it done before you start actually designing within Muse. And in the world of, I would say, designing to the extreme rule, you start with everything for desktop. And from that point, you can hide content that's not relevant for the phone or replace it with content that would be more appropriate for a mobile device. So let's start to look at this a little bit in action. I wanted to take today's session in a couple layers. I do need to admit I have a puppy that's going to bark. I guarantee it during this 1 hour. I'm a little on the go today. Let's see if we're lucky. And see where this session is. So just want to follow along and come back and answer some of those questions. So somebody tell that puppy not to bark. All right, looks like we're good. And I am following comments. So I am going to swing through there and take a look at them from time to time as I proceed here. Okay. So one thing that I think is a great resource is I love to work with Muse designers, and kind of the reason why we call this a jam session is we play together. I learn from you, you learn from me. It keeps my content really real and honest. And I think I do share some insights with the community. So Aaron Lawrence is one of my favorite San Francisco Muse designers. He works at a design development environment, and he's a beautiful typographer. He studied design in its traditional sense, but is great on the web. And he produced a page for me to really showcase typography. Haha. Of course, today is the day that it's going to be funny. Let's try this again. That is really funny since I was just here a little bit earlier today. Let's try that. So I'm going to update that URL. I'm not exactly sure what's funny there, but we're going to go directly to the root. I don't know, same URL. Internet gods are not allowed to misbehave today. This is a great exploration in typography in general, but there's a really nice section on responsive design that Aaron added about 2 years ago for Adobe Max. And it takes you through a couple of the areas you want to focus on around laying out your content. So Aaron really, see, look at that. Isn't that funny? I'm not sure. Maybe we've had issues. Y'all are welcome to check and see how you're doing on that page. But I don't know. There are a number of tiles that are here. I have these pages actually loaded on my own machine. So I'm going to jump over there. Chat's probably telling me what I am doing wrong. Yeah, some folks, it's loading. I'm not sure what's going on my end, but I honestly don't need it so much. I'm going to jump into Muse where I have the actual files here. And let's go ahead and just preview this site. What I want to do is show you a few of the concepts that we're going to cover and then how you achieve them in Adobe Muse. So Aaron jumps into this idea of just responsive thinking and the idea of thinking about your mobile designer or viewers and how you organize your content appropriately. One system that applies in any sort of design scenario is this idea of a grid system. And especially in the world where responsive content is going to adjust based on the width of a browser. And you as a designer need to come up with some sort of a methodology to make sure that that content is easy to maintain, easy to design, easy to view, and works across all of those breakpoints. So working with things known as tile design and grids can help immensely. And Aaron jumps into this idea that says that as you're designing your content, you can do yourself a favor if you break the world into pretty much 3 classes of devices. So you've got a desktop experience, more of a tablet experience, and then a phone or a smartphone device. And an easy way to handle that design might be, based on your content, 3 or 4 tiles, let's say. Those can be text columns or images on a desktop device at something up to, let's say, 1,400 pixels in width. You can always go larger, but you need to really think about your design and how far you want to take it on very large monitors. For a tablet device, you may bring that down to the same tiles or columns, but do 2 across with a 3rd below, rather than having to totally change all of that content. And then as you get down to a phone device, down to single column. Aaron goes on to really talk about typography in the mobile world, where you have the difference between content, for example, text that's going to flow within a container. So the beautiful part about Muse is that based on the width of content, it has something called the document object model, or the hierarchical structure, the DOM. And as we build out the hierarchical structure there, elements like text within a container will flow within that container. And if the container becomes more narrow, it's going to push everything below it appropriately. So notice Not seeing it here so much, but as I progress down on the page, I'll see more or less content to that which is below me. The second example for typography and mobile design has to do with SVG. This is kind of a back-end way to achieve a feature that some designers want in some instances. And that's really to scale the text as though it were an image. So when the browser width changes, the text scales. Now, some typographers think this is not great. So we haven't actually implemented it in Muse, where you take text and flatten it in essence as vector content and treat it as SVG. You do have the ability to do this very easily, though, in an application like Illustrator. If you copy to the clipboard, it will carry over the outline after you've converted it to outlines in Illustrator, and then copy to the clipboard. That scalable vector content, the SVG, will be on the clipboard and allows you to treat it more like an image and less like text. And using things like alt tags allow you to make sure your SEO is still preserved in this example. And it continues. It's just a really nice tutorial that Aaron's done. But let's kind of jump into some of the other concepts that he has. So if I swing on down to that section, another one has to do with the content that you're showing. And I really want to make sure we spend some good time on this today. Jeepers creepers. Of course, that's not going to work for me. So let's just go to the page and load it up. So what we've done here somewhat playfully is I really wanted Aaron to show off a couple of concepts, right? So when you're designing for desktop and phone, let's say the two extremes, you want to consider how you're going to handle your text and how you'll handle images, right? That's a lot. There's other things like videos and widgets and such, but let's boil it down for a moment. When it comes to text, let's actually slide down here for a moment. You'll notice I have a 3-column design that's here. And as I press and drag the edge of the browser, the 3 text containers have been set to fluid width, such that if they get to a point where the rule within Muse is the design breaks, so things feel to this visual designer, to Aaron, like the text is becoming too crowded, that's the time that you add a breakpoint on an individual page. You may have breakpoints in the header area and the footer area of your master to support navigation, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But the actual text on the page, the content of the page, can have its own unique set of breakpoints per page, per breakpoint in essence. So as I get to a point where my text is feeling a bit crowded, Aaron dropped in a breakpoint, and again I can press and drag for a certain amount of time till you see this flashing, indicating it's getting crowded, time for another breakpoint. Well, as I proceed, there's going to come a time where 3 columns is just feeling like bad typography, that it's too crowded on perhaps a tablet device. At that point, what Aaron did, just keep an eye on this. Unfortunately, the text is all the same, chicken, bacon, diced. But there's 3 columns of text here. When I jump to that next level, what he's done is taken that first column and spread it across the 2-column grid. The second and the third can then sit below that. If I jump now to the next most minimalist breakpoint, the phone layout, I think the important point I want to make here is here's that first column, here's the second column, and here's the third column. Because we support that ability to grow the height of the page, as you build the page, you can stack these text columns one right after another in the single column design, and rest assured that it's going to resize appropriately as I scroll down on the page, and the objects will move out of the way. Sometimes it takes a little wiggling. You may want to give a little space between the text containers, or even practice perhaps grouping them together to see how the browser is going to treat it. But that flowing behavior really does you a lot of favors. The other truth around text, and I've done this for sure, let's say on your desktop device you say, hey, come register for our service. The following contact form needs to be completed and we'll get back to you soon. So a kind of a classic contact us form. If you don't want to have that on your mobile device, the question is, how do you hide content and how do you change the words so they're appropriate for the viewer? In that example on the desktop design, I had an introduction saying, fill in this form, we'll get back to you. In that same page, if you drag the edge of the browser to the phone layout, it says, please give us a call, or when you're on a desktop device, go ahead and fill in the contact form and we'll get back to you. So one technique you can use in that is to hide and show specific content on specific breakpoints with text. That's the methodology we are also using with images here. And there's merit to talking about how images work within Muse. We're going to dig in on this. When you place an image in Muse, Muse takes responsibility for subsampling that image to the resolution of the device that it's being viewed on. So if you have a very large image and you put it up on a desktop device and someone then switches to a tablet device, it is going to subsample that image automatically to the resolution of that tablet device. It'll do the same for the phone using media queries and the way that we generate the code for that page, with one exception. And that's when you place content as a background fill within a container. You have the ability to set that to scale to fill the container. And part of what that means is that Muse doesn't know how large a viewer might make a browser window and how much it might need data to scale up to. So we're going to handle that case in just a few minutes. But to give you a preview of this type of behavior, let's say I had one image for desktop that was rich and large, and I just knew it would look great on a high DPI display. But when I got to something like a tablet device, I was concerned about having such a large image. Notice that this bicycle built for 3, when it jumps to the 2-column grid, becomes a totally different image. It's a bicycle built for 2. If I go down to the phone layout, a bicycle built for 1. What I've done is shown and hidden images on a per breakpoint basis. The last thing we're going to do, or actually it's going to roll around to the first, is to talk about mobile navigation and ways to get you started with some starting elements that we have available to build out navigation for tablet, desktop, and smartphone. So let's go ahead and dig in on some of these bits now. I'll keep some of these guys open. And let's jump over to my notes. So let's talk about the mobile menu solutions. To be really honest, the Muse team, as of August of this year, still 2017, we re-engineered a number of pretty complex widgets, the composition widget, the slideshow widget, and the form widget, to be fully responsive. So they embrace multiple breakpoints, and you have the ability to customize the layout based on each breakpoint and the fluid and responsive behaviors for elements within those contact forms, within those complex forms, let's say, within those complex widgets. We have on our list to do a task to take the menu widget and make it more of an automatic menu widget that will support multiple breakpoints and multiple browsers and such. We've not gotten a chance to do that. It's on the ask list for engineering, but I can't guarantee that it will be out in the next few months, which is what I have purview into. So what I want to do is show you some techniques for easily building out mobile menus. I've given you a file that I encourage you to go ahead and download either after the fact here in the session or as I move along. But if you click this Dropbox link in the tiny URL that I mentioned, so tinyurl.com/mujam-211, if you browse to that location, you can download this Sprite example that I've given you. And let's start with just building a very simple page with this little library item. So I'm going to switch over into Adobe Muse, and let's just start with a new file. So File, New, and as far as breakpoints go, I'm going to leave the default value at 960 and click OK. Muse takes me into my plan mode here, and I can see my master pages and my individual pages. The example I'm giving you is actually lifted from the landing page of muse.adobe.com. So it's a very dark page. I'm going to go ahead and prepare for that by going into the master, and I'm going to change this to have a black fill. And that's really the only change I've made so far. It's at 960. It's a fluid breakpoint, and it has a min width of 320. I'm going to stop and take a look at questions real quick. So Mick is saying, is SVG text bag for SEO? The thing is, if you put in an alt tag and copy that same text into it, it will be embedded in the HTML. I've heard there's always different opinions about SEO. I've heard different bits. to have an alt tag or an image tag that has text in it. It does allow screen readers and search engines to find that text. It's not as great as if it were HTML text, to be honest, but I don't know that it actually really hurts. You'll use it judiciously. The idea is that you're not going to design your whole site. If your whole page is going to be text that's going to scale, let's say, you might as well, I don't know, save it as an image or something. But my assumption is that you'll want to have bits of text that might flow in that way. Like I find it really important for headlines. I'll show you an old design where it first came up for me. kickapigeon.com. This was one of our demo assets. And the art director went and basically designed this site with this idea of introducing pigeon here in the headline, knowing that we'd have responsive text. Well, notice how that text is scaling for me because it's a headline. I don't want to add a breakpoint every 10 pixels in order to allow that flow to happen. When I jump to the next breakpoint for tablet, I have a different image that's scaling there as well until I jump down to the phone layout. So in my opinion, that's an example of just an embellishment, a headline, a graphic that you would use the SVG text for. So I wouldn't use it in a lot of content. Okay, checking comments here real quick. Okay. For people that are panicked about the root password thing on Macs, I just got a patch from Apple. So check and see if you got an update. It's always a good idea, especially when you share your screen an awful lot. Okay, back on track. So I'm here in Adobe Muse. I've got my basic elements set up. As I mentioned, I gave you this as kind of a tool that you can use to try to understand a little bit about a mobile layout. My intent is going to have 3 breakpoints: desktop, tablet, and smartphone. And if I switch out here, let's show you the end result that I'm going after. So if you look at the top navigation here, it says Adobe Muse on the left, and there's desktop navigation on the right. As I press and drag to more of a tablet class of devices, kind of just for fun, notice that the navigation centers below the headline Adobe Muse. If I press and drag one more time, I get into the phone class of devices where it's much smaller, having lots of text in the navigation would be tough. If I click on this little hamburger menu, as it's known, I get a nice transition from open to close or close to open. This is using a really old-fashioned world that I remember when I first started at Macromedia in the world of Director, and that's something known as a Sprite. So based on, I'm going to show you the trick. As my dog attacks a toy behind us. At least she's not barking. We should be happy. If I click to close this, notice that the content pushes back up. So this is a push example and hides the navigation that I've exposed there. So we're going to build this navigation with the elements I've given you. Now, I want to make life a little bit easier, and there are some nice ways that you can carry over not only elements that are designed, but the breakpoints that you've designed the layout for that element as well. So I'm going to go ahead to my library where I've gone in and created the Sprite mobile menu library item that you're able to download and work with on your own. And in it, since I've installed it, so the way to do that is just double click on it once you've downloaded it. It will open up Muse, and in your library, open this folder, Sprite Mobile Menu, if all goes well. Notice there's 2 elements here, Menu Desktop and Menu Phone. When I drag content from a library item, if I drag it by its name, it will only bring over content that's relevant to the current breakpoint I have on my design canvas. If instead I drag from the plus sign on the right-hand side there, it will bring over not only the design element, but it'll bring over any relevant breakpoint and any layout associated with that breakpoint for the element. Showing this is a little easier than talking about it. So notice that I only have 960 here. I'm going to press and drag Menu Desktop and get it somewhere reasonable on the page. We'll shoot for the center here. Notice it's still selected. With it still selected, I'm going to drag it so it's definitely centered. But notice what just happened. We had 960 for a breakpoint. That happened to be one of the breakpoints in this library item, but when I dragged it on the canvas, it realized there was also a 1400 breakpoint and 600 for mobile. If I click to 1400, notice that the objects are still selected here. It's a little hard for Muse to guess where to place multiple breakpoint items, so keeping that selected is a good way to easily come in and just adjust its placement. But notice that that desktop design is now in play. I've got the content on the right, I've got the logo on the left. If I come back to tablet, that's all still in good shape. And if I come down to my smallest breakpoint, I have nothing, because what I've done is hidden the logo and hidden the text, the menu for my phone layout. I want to put a hamburger menu there instead. So the next thing I want to do is here in that smaller breakpoint, I'm not going to grab from the plus sign because I really only need the phone configuration for the smallest breakpoint here. So I'm going to press and drag this onto the canvas. And once it gets there, I'm just going to nuzzle it up here towards the top. And let's move it over a little bit as well so that everybody's where they should be. Okay, so I've given you some elements. I want to explain what each element is now, because you're going to go to do this from scratch and you may miss a couple steps. So in the largest breakpoint, basically I have a dynamic menu. So this is a menu widget. I've styled it with text, underscores, smooth transitions. It's in really good shape. And it is a manual menu. I can link it to specific pages. It could be dynamically generated, but for this demonstration, this is a brand new file. I didn't want to build out all of the pages. So it's just a manual menu, and I can configure it here in the flyout with the logo on the left. That menu is set towards the top of the page to stay on the right-hand side. So as I scroll down, if I had more content on the page, it would scroll out of the way. Adobe Muse stays on the left. It would scroll out of the way as well, but it would remain left. That's how I want things to be. When you jump to the second breakpoint, the logo is now pinned to the center and scrolling off screen, and the navigation is also pinned to center and scrolling off screen. You can have it be pinned to the top and not scroll, but that's a design decision. As I go to the smallest breakpoint, what I did is I selected these items and I right-clicked to basically hide in a specific breakpoint or another breakpoint so that it would not show up on the phone layout. I can always kind of figure out what someone else has done if I bring up the Layers panel. And you'll notice in the Layers panel here, I can see, interestingly enough, here's the mobile menu, that hamburger menu that's only on the phone breakpoint, and the dots are not clicked, basically changing the visibility so that you cannot see these elements. On this layout, I just see the desktop menu and logo. If I jump to the smaller breakpoint, notice how that switches. I have visibility to all of these top elements, and it's hidden all of the design elements. From there, I've done some interesting things on the phone layout. So I've got an accordion here. This is a standard in the widget library panel here, accordion, that I pressed and dragged on the canvas. And I configured that accordion. Just to be kind of complete about it, you'll notice it says download, open, close Sprite. So if you really want to follow through and use everything we've got here, when you preview this in the browser, if you click that link, it'll also point you to a PNG file that you can download and define as a background fill to the accordion. And that background fill is very state dependent. So notice if I click once to expand the accordion, that hamburger menu changes to a close box. If I click again, it closes back up. Other things that I've done here is I've chosen to have it not overlap items below. That means it will push the content out of the way. That needs a little fiddling with sometimes. I find that sometimes that works, and you got to kind of make sure you're in the exact right state of the accordion when you set this attribute to make sure it's pushing the content below you. So that's a nice way to get that push effect. If I come in and preview what we've got so far, I pull that on File to preview this page in the browser. And we start in that largest breakpoint. I've got my nice navigation. I've got rollover states. It's fixed in distance from the right-hand side of the browser. As I press and drag to the tablet class of devices, it's centered just the way I wanted. It'll scroll off the page if I have more content. As I press and drag a little further, here we are on that mobile layout. And notice the nice behavior. When I click here, it seems as though the hamburger menu is animating up and the close box is animating up behind it. Kind of a fun effect there. And when I close things out, it animates back. This is kind of a throwback to the world of sprites. So let me show you how I went about setting this up. And I'm taking credit, but this was actually Ollie Pordelli's brilliant idea. So there's this cute little file here. Let me see if I can show this thing in a meaningful way rather quickly. Throw this on the desktop. I just kind of want you to get a look at the layout, and white on white's a little tough. That was terrific. All right. This is where I confess to still using Adobe Fireworks CS3 because I was the product manager there 10 years ago, and it's my home, much more than Photoshop. Any Fireworks fans out there? All three of you? Okay. All right, still looking pretty white, but let me kind of show you this a little bit. The best way, oh, goodness me. This is not kind. Hold on. I don't like it. Menu trigger preview. Okay. What this is basically is it's as though you can create two containers, two squares, and they should have equal padding around them. So basically, I have a white rectangle here with no fill, no stroke, and it's placed in an equal distance from the object below it. What you want to do is just make sure you can do actually up to 9 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I guess it's 8. But you want to position them as though you were doing kind of Hollywood squares, where each graphic has its own square. When you're in Adobe Muse and you work with such a thing, so I've got this accordion and I have a background fill, and that background fill is the hamburger menu. With this selected, when I go to the fill dropdown, notice that I'm using that same graphic, menu trigger PNG, but doing something a little tricky here. It says original size, that's important. And notice where the pinning attribute is set, to the upper right-hand corner of that graphic. Now, if I had 9 different graphics that I wanted to use, let's say I have 9 thumbnail elements for 9 titles in a Muse site, I can have a single graphic with 9 squares of 9 different images if I want to use this approach. What happens is when I change the state here, so notice it's pinned to the upper right, I'm going to go ahead and change to the active state. Notice it's now that close box. And if I take a look at that fill dropdown, it's still using the same graphic. It's just using the lower right corner to determine the position of an object that's not scaling. The last piece that's really important about this sort of trick is if you go to the dropdowns here, notice in the transition, when Ollie built this out, he put a fade transition of about 1 second between that first image and the second. So you get that sense of movement for that one little graphic element. Okay, lots of little tricks here. So now that we've got some of these basics established, let's talk about some of the other just mobile techniques that you do want to take as you're working. So I'm going to go back to Aaron Lawrence's project and take a look at how he played with the text and images on this area here. So I talked about this idea around how you can have a fixed set of tiles, text containers, any sorts of elements. I'm going to juice this up a little bit because life is short, and you know, if you don't wing it, you can't make mistakes. So what I want to do is grab some little bit more real text. Let's go somewhere safe. And not a lot of text here, but I got lots of text here. Since I wrote most of this, I own the rights to the text here, I would suggest. Of course, my dog's getting tangled up in my headset. okay. Going back to where we were. I'm going to just take some real text here, and I want to just put it in here because I want to show you the difference between text of different lengths and just actual content so you can keep an eye on it. So I've got 2 different size blocks of text here, just making it a little challenging. As you're working, when you do have this scenario, one thing you'll want to do, you can always show up grids and guides here. So if I show up my guides, I want to make sure that my text containers are, to begin with, actually I'm pausing as I think here a little bit. In my original instance, I'm going to let all 3 of them be equal in size and height. And I should probably be fair and really try this, because how else can I make mistakes, you ask? I'm going to grab all 3 of these. I'm going to right-click and copy them. And let's go over to that other design, the one we're working on, so I can make mistakes. And let's go here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this guy and go to my page here, and to make life a little easier for myself, I'm just going to get a little bit of white happening here. So I'll make sure that's resized to full width, and we'll give it some kind of a bright white color. And I'm going to move things down here just to give us a little visual break. Notice that I'm here at 960 and I only have the 1 breakpoint. I can see that there's other breakpoints here for my desktop, tablet, and smartphone. I want to bring those breakpoints over from my master really quickly. So what I'm going to do before I do that is I'm going to just paste the text that I put on the clipboard. Do that one more time. Notice that I can paste and create breakpoints. I can just paste and place, or I can do a simple paste. I want to do a simple paste. Let's move out so I can see what I'm pasting. Actually, give me a couple steps here. Let's go back out to our master, and I want to bring over the breakpoints that I've set here: tablet, desktop, and phone. As I mentioned, you add breakpoints when your design breaks. I know that for this text example, I'm going to do 3 columns on desktop, 2 on tablet, and 1 on smartphone. So I do want to carry over these breakpoints. A really lazy way to do that is draw anything on the canvas. Can be an empty container. Cut it, so Command X to cut it to the clipboard. Swing on back to that page now, and when I go to paste that empty container here, I'm going to say paste and create breakpoints. Watch the breakpoint bar as I do that. It adds all the right breakpoints for me. I can now delete that kind of silly object. Having done that, I wrecked my clipboard. So let's go back over to the original design and grab the headline and these 3 blocks of text. He's got a crazy big breakpoint here, so let's make my life a little easier and get these 3 skinnier columns. I'm not going to go as wide as he did. 1, 2, and 3. I'll grab this guy and copy it. And go to the home page, and I'm going to go ahead and paste. Not in place, doesn't really matter to me. And do not create breakpoints, just bring over my 3 columns of text and my headline. All right, pretty reasonable. I'm going to unselect the headline here, and if you use a combination of keys, Command Shift, I think, on the Macintosh. Let's try that again. All right, I'm using Option and Shift as I'm pressing and dragging. And notice that it's reducing the space between these objects. And now with no keyboards held down, I can continue to reduce them until they start to fit this space. It's a little awkward. I probably would not do this exact design for this exact element, but it proves our point. And there's my little headline area. Okay, so I've got 3 columns of text now. The thing that's challenging is that we've got different lengths to those text objects. For this larger breakpoint, if I do want them to be fluid in width, I'll make sure they're all the same height just to start with, and select them all and make sure that their resize behavior is the same. Notice that I'm seeing kind of a mixed state here. That's probably because I've got the rectangle selected. Let's try to unselect that. So I have just the 3 columns, and they're all set to fluid width. You want to confirm that. What that allows me to do is as I press and drag here, the text is going to flow as I'm working, okay? So it flows equally amongst those 3 different breakpoints. Now that's pretty good. What I want to do now is take a look at, let's see what we got going on over here. All right, have placed this on the medium breakpoint. I meant to send it on the big one. That's okay. Mistakes are opportunities to learn. What I want to do is take all of the things I've fiddled with a bit here, and I'm going to select them and right-click and say, go ahead and copy all the text formatting I've just done to this largest breakpoint for me. Also, go on in and change the size and position to that largest breakpoint to match what I've just done here. So it's an easy way to carry over my work without having to go in and do it for every breakpoint. When we first deliver this feature, your instinct is to kind of delete objects and move objects around, but because it's shared content across breakpoints, you really need to work with them within each breakpoint, sometimes carrying over attributes and sometimes making them totally unique. For what I have now, in this layout, I'm going to come out and kind of get them all around the same minimum height. And I think we're in pretty good shape. Here's my largest breakpoint. I've got my tablet. I'm feeling this is indeed pretty darn crowded. So I'm going to emulate the behavior Aaron did and bring this guy down and go ahead and resize this container. So one thing that's really important to point out is when you start to create unique text setting attributes per breakpoint, you need to make sure in the tool panel here, you're seeing the big T in this toggle. This is the most unintuitive icon to me. I never understand it without rolling over the tooltip. But the big T says that text can be different in point size text attributes per breakpoint. That allows you to make this slightly bigger on a tablet if you think it's easier to read than it would be on a desktop, even larger on a phone if you think that's appropriate. Any text attribute changes you make will be unique to that breakpoint when you've set that toggle. So I'm going to come on in here and resize this guy. And I now want content to kind of flow up based on the container. So I'm going to tighten up my text container a little bit here. Notice I get a line. It's a funny truth here. It's to represent when you're hitting basically the padding for this container. So it could be the text height or any spacing that might be applied there. But you kind of want to go ahead and make sure you're right about that line where you see the dotted line. I'll grab these next 2 elements, and again, using some of those fancy selection keys, I'll go ahead and increase the space between them just a little bit, holding Option and Shift, and then press and drag to get 2 columns. And then I'm going to come in and adjust so that they're of equal height as they work. So it's the same text now. If I come in and say, where's the potato chips? I can make that change. I can go back now to my desktop instance and say, wow, you spelled potato wrong, and fix it, and that change will apply to all 3 breakpoints. The text is consistent. I can also come in and say, you know what, this should be centered and a whole lot bigger. For tablet, I can jump back to desktop. It did not affect it there because I asked it not to. If I did want it to, I can say, oh my gosh, I forgot. I do want to make the text bigger on the phone layout. Just right-click on that object and say, copy the text attributes that I've changed to the larger breakpoint. So I still have that tunneling-like capability. Let's move our little whiteness down here a little bit more so we can see what we're doing and make sure these containers are the same height. As I mentioned, sometimes you may find grouping them keeps them together a little bit better. The Muse works very hard to try to take arbitrary content and make something meaningful out of it. And sometimes it can use a little help with things like grouping. All right, I've got more loveliness going on here. I'm going to take the lazy approach here and press and drag these guys out so that they're closer to full width. I don't even have to be exact, to be honest. I'll show you a trick here. Press and drag up. Not exactly like that. Erg. Let's go back. Okay. Take this guy and I'm going to reduce it. to its actual text. Let's say these were paragraphs and I really wanted them to fit tightly together. As I mentioned, you might need to fiddle a little bit, but Muse will work pretty hard to make this all flow and stack well, even though they would be separate containers. So you do want to select all. Make sure you don't have too many spaces at the bottom. That'll affect you adversely as far as how Muse is guessing your content. So I had a little space that was there that I didn't want. And I will reduce this space until I get to that line again. There you go. And it's a nice way to get some consistent spacing. Having gotten all three of these in good shape, I may say go ahead and make them stretch to browser width. If that gets too close to the edges, I can add padding as I work along and just kind of butt this up a little bit more tightly. So there's a chance I probably need to do a little more fiddling, but let's go ahead and just see the results of what we've done so far. All right. I'm going to come on in. As I mentioned, I'll probably need a little tweaking, but here we are. There's my overly large headline with my 3-column text. As I press and drag, I jump to the tablet layout, and notice what happens here. The text is moving up. So this text is going from 3-column, boom, it goes to 4-column, and these objects move down. You may struggle with this. Part of the hard thing that's not intuitive is one reason why this is moving really beautifully is this is a fluid width text container followed by a fluid width text container and another fluid width text container. If for some reason you set this to be fixed width, you may not see the reduction in the space as you go along. So kind of tricky to figure out at times. Till I get to that single column. And notice I'm having a little bit of trouble here. I need to come back and fiddle to make sure that this container is going to flow so that that content moves down below. I want to keep going now, though, rather than fiddle too much. I had mentioned how, as you're working, you may decide that you have a contact form that says, hey, fill this in, we'll see you soon, or hey, go to the desktop when you get a chance. The way you easily can do that is if this were a contact form, I'd say these would be the directions for what to do. So let's change this to fill in my form. And I might hide this because it's not appropriate. I would just come to it and say, hide it in this breakpoint. If I jump to the tablet version, I may want to hide it as well because I still have a contact form. So I'll say, fill in my form. When I get to that smallest breakpoint, I might say, don't fill in my form. Go ahead and hide that in this particular breakpoint and say, hey, go to the desktop to fill in the form. Or I could have a phone number that you just call directly. By hiding and showing text on particular breakpoints, it allows you to reduce the content on your mobile devices to only that which is really relevant for those devices. I'm going to stop and see how you guys are doing. Looks like folks are happy, which makes me happy. Mohammed, I'm glad you love Adobe Muse. I do too. 2 weeks from now, we're going to do a jam session with John Ramos of J26. He spends most of his life worrying about SEO and Adobe Muse. I'm really excited to have him because SEO is elfin magic. And I've always learned new things from different folks. There's no absolutes, I think, when it comes to search engine optimization. It's a voodoo art. And John is a great proprietor of such an art. So 2 weeks from now, we're going to do a jam session on that topic. I'm also shifting my schedule. I'm now living on the East Coast of the States. So I'm going to shift this by about 3 hours earlier so that we can get a little bit more of a better part of the day for me and expose it to some folks in different parts of the world if they want to attend live. All right, let's talk a little bit now about the images that we did. I think you're starting to understand, hopefully, this whole idea of hiding and showing the content. But let's talk about those images. I want to show you how Aaron went about setting up the different bicycle bits. So pretty straightforward now that we know the trick. If I come into the layers panel and click on this bicycle, I can see it's on layer 1. And if I look on down for the dot, it's just an image frame, so this is an SVG element, but it's visible on this page. If you keep an eye on that element, and I go to the next smaller breakpoint, it's still visible there. The one below that, notice that the dot is unchecked, and a different dot, in essence, a different graphic, has been checked. So this allows you to hide and show images on a per breakpoint basis. Now, I mentioned that you don't worry too much about photo JPEG content being too large, or even PNG content, because Muse will automatically subsample those image content to handle the web and to handle high DPI devices and mobile devices. It just does the right thing to a large extent. If you do want to support high DPI devices, when you set up your project, it's important that in site properties, you go into the content section. I always forget where this is. Let's try layout. There's an option here where you can set the resolution to be high DPI. That says that asynchronously, if let's say I'm on a high DPI iPhone 8 Plus, and I'm loading up a page that has a very high resolution image. The web browser on my phone is going to load the standard instance of that image at standard resolution and asynchronously. So in the background, it will then load the 2x instance of that image, and will just it becomes like less blurry to more clear as that asynchronous update happens. You see this all the time on computers these days, but it will seamlessly bring in the higher res version if I do have a 2x instance of that image available, and the browser, the network that I'm working on, can load that higher res image. So that's one way to just give you the flexibility for high DPI devices. When you're working, you can come in and decide that this larger SVG, well, doesn't matter. Let's pretend this was a resolution dependent image and not SVG, and make sure that it is saved at a higher resolution and hide that on desktop, show it on desktop and hide it on the lower devices. The time that this mindset doesn't work quite as well that I mentioned is when you're filling containers. So let's say the approach I wanted to have here was just going to come on down and extend this site a little bit. And let's say I just want to work with an image. I'm going to go grab something safe. I'm working with an artist who does beautiful work, so he's pretty safe. And I'm just going to come and press and drag this image onto the canvas. And when I do so, I can set it to be responsive, height and width, such that as I drag the browser edge here, it scales. And that works really well. And I'm telling Muse pretty explicitly, you know what? At this breakpoint, I want this to be a particular dimensions, basically 6,000 pixels wide. And I want you to scale it down. If I jump to another breakpoint, I can say, you know what? That's a little beefy for this particular breakpoint, this particular device. So go ahead and scale it back down for me a little bit more and center it. So I'm controlling that on a per breakpoint basis and setting it to scale within the breakpoint. The way that this does not work exactly the same, in that it will not understand how to subsample images, is if you scale to fill a container. So instead of just placing this image, in the second instance, I want to come on in and draw another container. And I'm going to pull down under fill here and go grab an image. So let's see if I grab this nice image here. And in my image attributes here, I'm going to have it scale to fill the container. And I'll go ahead and center it by default. Notice that this page is set with the arrows pointing outwards. That means that if I go to a browser that can run higher, that's wider than 1,700 pixels, I can still drag the browser larger and larger, and content will grow. If I switch the arrows the other direction, it effectively says, stop at 1,700, don't even get any bigger, because that would be awful. We'll go ahead and keep it a little too big here. And I'm going to go ahead and preview the page in the browser. And let's take a look at what types of messes we might have created. Notice here I have kind of a browser readout here that's telling me what size my browser width is. There's that first scale to fill image. And as I press and drag, it is scaling and changing between breakpoints. As I get down on the page, I've got the scale to fill behavior. It's a little jumpy because content's moving. And notice how it is filling that container and scaling. There's no real great way for me to simulate this, but if I try to zoom out, I'm going to hit Command minus an awful lot. I'm simulating an incredibly large display, and notice how small, for example, the bicycle got and how text went crazy because we're at like, I don't know, 5,000 pixels in width. Because I set these to be scale to fill, this scale to fill object is going to just keep growing. This could be massive. It could be the size of a football screen. It's not going to stop. Because Muse does not know what your intent might be there, when you set something to scale to fill, you're going to want to have a lot of data, and you're going to want to make sure that those files are not too large to load on a tablet or a smartphone, because we don't have a real trigger to determine how big it might be. All right, we've shared together one other hour in the world of Muse Jam Sessions. I again invite you to come join me again in 2 weeks with John Ramus as we talk about SEO. I encourage you to follow through. There's a little bit more detail that we didn't get into today. One nice thing is how to play with browser device testing tools. I'm going to try to toss this in just for a second real quick. So let's say I was back here at actual size, and I liked the work that I was doing, and I wanted to test to see how my navigation and how my text is going to behave. The first level of testing is to just preview in the browser. A second one, and I've given you instructions for both Chrome and Firefox. I'm a Mac head, so it's what I know. But you have the ability to have developer tools in Chrome, for example. And all you need to do is come in under View, Developer, and just enable Developer Tools. When you have that, you can right-click and inspect the work you've done in a bit of a more device-specific way. Now, there's never going to be anything like having a browser on a device running your actual website. But before you get there, you can simulate some of those environments. Here in the Developer Tool panel, I can toggle to a device toolbar. And from there, notice that I can select responsive, which is just like Muse. It's going to show me how my navigation, for example, will behave as I press and drag in a browser, how interactions with elements would be handled. So I can debug or refine things pretty easily here. I also can come in and choose my favorite devices. Once again, I do want to say that the world of device-specific web design is gone. There are almost 1,000 different browsers and devices. If you go to an iPhone 7 Plus and you hold it in portrait mode, it thinks it's a phone. If you switch it to landscape mode, it thinks it's a tablet based on the resolution. There's no absolute way to be true device specific with so many devices. But you can come here and configure the ones that are most important to you by setting the resolution and dimensions, and then jump between those devices, change the orientation, and quickly see, are things behaving the way you'd expect them to before you go further to actually loading them on actual devices. All right, we are now top of the hour. I'm so happy to have spent this time and that my puppy didn't even bark much at all. So phew for that. I'll see you in 2 weeks. If you'd like to watch recordings, go to my YouTube channel or go to the events page on muse.adobe.com. And if I didn't catch some of your questions and that frustrates you, you're welcome to send me an email. I'm at Dani@adobe.com. I don't always have tons of time for too much email communications, but I'm happy to help if there's a quick answer I can throw at you. So I'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you, everyone, for your time.